Hey guys, it's Marty from owingsart.com, and today we're going to take a look at the Winsor and Newton Pigment Markers. These were just introduced last year, new on the market. There's a variety of different aspects to these new markers, and we'll talk about and cover all that. But first, right off the bat, I just want to say that they basically have three unique aspects to them. One, they claim to have a 100-year lightfast rating under normal gallery conditions. That means, not in direct sunlight, but that these pigments will last 100 years, and that most other markers and their pigments will only last like half as long, or 50 years, before they begin to really fade significantly. Secondly, they have a unique white blender with them now, so that that's not anywhere else on the market. The white blender is something unique to the Winsor & Newton set, and these pigment markers in particular. And then number three really is their paper. They introduced a new line of paper specifically to be used with these Winsor & Newton markers, but because I wanted to just try the markers out on a regular, under regular circumstances, I didn't really pick up their paper. So I hope that isn't going to shortchange these markers and their effectiveness in any way, but yet and still you can get a lot of interesting effects and things from using these markers. So one thing I noticed right off the bat, and I'll talk a little bit about, is these have a very ergonomic shape. They're rounded very nicely. They fit in the hand well. They have both a wide chisel tip and a fine tip on these. So if you're looking for a brush marker, these aren't it. They don't have a brush end on these markers, so you use them in sort of a different way. But today I'll go through the steps of testing out each one of the colors. We'll go through some of the pros and cons of these, and at the end I'll give these a rating. Now, as I add color to the paper here, and I'm just using a regular drawing paper here. This is a Strathmore regular colored pencil or drawing paper. I want to say the exact name so I don't forget. This is their 400 series. In other words, their best colored paper, and it's about 100 pounds. So it's a very absorbent colored paper, maybe not well suited to these markers, but since artists will be using them under a variety of conditions, I figured I'd give them a try here first. And then I'm going to try some different paper that's more like the Winsor & Newton special paper that they recommend you buy and use with these. Okay, on to some additional quick facts here about these. So people will ask right away, are they alcohol or water-based markers? Well, here's the interesting thing. I read the safety data sheet on this product for the chemical compositions, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, but it's really neither. They're ethanol based actually, and if you go look at the properties and the chemicals inside these markers, it's really 73% ethanol, about 1% amino 2-methylpropanol, which is I think a chemical that helps disperse the pigments onto the paper. So if you have high sensitivity to chemicals and things like that, you might be sensitive to these, although the safety sheet says there's no known toxicity or harmful chemicals in here. But again, it has some other chemicals in it like dipropylene glycol, sodium hydroxide. These are some of the chemicals in it. And the white blender itself is a titanium dioxide. If you're a painter, like an oil painter, you're probably used to hearing about these chemicals. But if you're a marker artist or just somebody who likes to draw and paint, you might not necessarily know some of these chemicals. That's why I like to go to the safety data sheet and actually look at the chemical properties contained in some of these art supplies we use, because you might have a sensitivity to it or it might bother you. It just depends. As long as you're not going to have prolonged exposure to the chemicals in here and they're not in a high enough concentrate to bother you, you might be like 99% of people and not experience any problems at all with them. So these, again, less ominously about chemical composition, I don't mean to, I'm not trying to scare people, but you should know what kind of chemicals are in the art supplies and materials you use. So anyway, I'll put a link to the data sheet in here. On to some other aspects of these markers. They're not waterproof, so if you're curious about that, they're not really waterproof. They are, however, acid-free. And the unique thing here that Winsor & Newton claims is that, unlike dye-based markers that sort of get their longevity from sinking into the paper really deeply. These spread the pigments across or disperse over the surface area of the paper, and therefore that's where the longevity comes from, I guess. That's what they claim anyway. You'll need to store these markers horizontally and flat so that you don't have any gathering or pooling of the ink at one end or the other, or the dye or the material inside these markers. So here I decided to use a Yupo paper, which is a polypropylene paper, which is a little bit smoother, a little bit more like, I think, the Winsor Newton paper that they like you to use with these markers, because it allows the marker color to stay on the surface longer than a regular paper where it would sink in. So here you can see when I use the white blender how you can get some serious painterly effects with these. Just some of the basics too. You don't necessarily need bleed-proof paper, although this Yupo paper does a really good job with these if you want to move the color around. The reason being is that they're pigment-based, and so they claim you won't get a lot of bleed-through, although I did get some bleed-through on my just colored pencil paper that I used. So they really recommend that you use their pigment paper for any sort of work that you want to do with these. But again, that's just an additional expense that Winsor Newton kind of puts on the artist. I suggest you just try them on a variety of different papers and see what you like best, although I will make a case for using like this Yupo paper, which gives you that surface that you can still work with the markers and move the color around a little bit better. Or you could just get away with doing this less expensively, again, by just gessoing the paper, and then you could, that'll give you a more, it creates more surface tension so you can move the color around better, which is kind of the way I think these are made and what they're made for. So you can get this Yupo paper in both like an opaque and a translucent variety, so whatever you want to try. So here I'm just blending some Copic markers just to see how an alcohol marker would blend in comparison. And they do okay. Yeah, I mean, the Copic markers are great. They're very popular, and for good reason. People love using them. They're easy to blend. And when you compare them to these new pigment markers by Winsor Newton, I guess where Winsor Newton would excel is in the longevity or the light fastness, but I think they do take a bit of getting used to, and you have to know how you want to apply the markers to get the greatest effect from them. There's lots of great marker artists out there. I'm not one of them, but and crafters who use lots of markers on a daily basis and probably have great advice for how to apply these. Maybe go check out Lindsay the Frugal Crafter. She's great, and she's probably already checked these out. But the other thing I want to note here just quickly is it's very difficult to get these markers out of the packaging that they come in. So, I mean, and the packaging is nice, it's very fancy, but the markers are really, really stuck in the in these little holders here. I imagine people would just take them out and put them in a box so they wouldn't have to struggle putting them in and out of here. But that's one thing, piece of feedback for Winsor Newton. Don't, I mean, it's not like a child-proof lid or some kind of drunk test. You really should make these markers a little bit easier to pull out. Really had to struggle to get them out. But I love the ergonomic shape of the markers, and they're nice in the hand and easy to hold. So plus that they just definitely get a thumbs up for that. Well, in comparison to some of the other markers I took a look at today, like the Copics and the Winsor and Newton, the Faber-Castell Pitt markers, these are, in comparison, pretty expensive when you consider the value proposition here and the fact that these particular markers are not refillable. So you buy them once, and when they're done, they're done. I mean, the pigment is strong here, and I guess that's where Winsor Newton would say, well, these are going to last a long time. You've got really strong, a different way of applying the pigment to paper. You can expect the light fastness to hold up well. But all in all, I found that the pigments were sort of weak to me in color and vibrancy. As you can see here, it's almost like a muted palette. And even the blending was difficult on anything but the Yupo paper. So that's going to incur another expense for the artist. And when you think about the comparison there and the value that you'd have to throw in, I guess, you know, you could trade off. There is that. And so I'm sort of arguing with myself a little bit here, but I guess there's a trade-off for the light fastness and the unique type of blender and I guess the being able to use it with some different types of paper. Maybe that makes a big difference to you. But for me, I just don't see where these stack up really. And you know, although I'm not a marker artist, I would give you that. I mean, in terms of, you know, doing all my work with marker, I usually use colored pencil or watercolor. But again, just for all the considerations today and all my thoughts around these and just the way they performed, I struggle to recommend them to anybody but hardcore marker artists or crafters who just absolutely want their stuff to last 100 years and be able to utilize the special paper and stuff. So yes, they fit a niche, but overall the niche just isn't enough for me in terms of all of the things sort of stacked up against these. And you know, I think the ethanol idea with these markers is unique, and maybe it helps disperse the dyes across the surface tension of the paper, and all that stuff is interesting and it's nice. But and I don't mean to sound like a Luddite or I'm stuck in the mud or something, or I'm not used to using new stuff, because I love new art supplies. These just didn't do it for me. They're not vibrant enough. They're not bright enough. All of that, I just can't give these a good recommendation. So here's my final rankings. You can look through in these different areas and see what you think. If you've got any experience with them and you want to compare notes, I'm happy to hear from you in the comments section, and maybe you can give me some feedback. Maybe I'm missing something that I hadn't considered, or maybe there's other factors here at play that you want to talk to me about. So here's the final overall ranking. I'm disappointed to say that Winsor & Newton really kind of fell short for me with these markers, but maybe you'll experience something different with these. Anyway, I really appreciate you guys stopping by to check this video out today and a good look at these Winsor & Newton pigment markers made in China. And hope you'll go ahead and feel free to share the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment question if you have one. I always like to respond to those. So that's pretty much it for today. Next video I have coming up is to cover water brushes, so stay tuned for that. Thanks everybody. Have a great day. This is Marty for owingsart.com. So long.